So welcome to the 2022 DiLCo Lecture Series on Digital Language and Communication. I'm Yanis Androutopoulos from the University of Hamburg. DiLCo is a 3-year scientific network on digital language variation in context, initiated in 2021. It's coordinated by my colleague Heike Zinsmeister and myself at the University of Hamburg, and currently includes scholars from universities in the US, UK, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. DiLCo is generously supported by the University of Hamburg within the Universities of Excellence scheme funded by the German federal government and federal states. DiLCo aims to stimulate scientific exchange between various approaches in digital language and communication research within linguistics, broadly speaking. We are particularly interested in bridging gaps between qualitative and quantitative methods and in increasing dialogue between ethnographic, pragmatic, variationist, multimodal, and computational lines of work. To this purpose, DiLCo is organizing online and on-site activities such as lecture series, methods, workshops, and conference panels. Part of these activities is this lecture series that's actually kicking off today for 2022, scheduled to run entirely online throughout the year. The aim of the DiLCo Lecture Series is to showcase cutting-edge international research on digital language and communication by both senior and younger researchers from across the world that draws on key concepts and topics in sociocultural linguistics, such as community, context, identity, mediated interaction, multimodality, and linguistic change in researching how people use language and other signs to communicate online. We particularly welcome presentations of innovative methods that cut across traditional disciplinary boundaries. We are recording these lectures, as you already see, to build up a repository that will be available free of charge from Hamburg University's video portal Lecture2Go. Please visit our website, dilco.uni-hamburg.de, for more information on this and other network activities. Now, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker for today's lecture, Ruth Page. Ruth is currently a reader at the University of Birmingham in English language and linguistics. Ruth's internationally acclaimed research is perhaps best known for the innovative way she pulls together narrative studies and multimodal discourse analysis in her research on various kinds of mediated narratives. Ruth has written several books around these issues, including Stories and Social Media, published in 2012, and Narratives Online, Shared Stories and Social Media, 2018. She's also editor of the volume New Perspectives on Narrative and Multimodality, 2010, and co-editor of Museum Thresholds, The Design and Media of Arrival, 2018. So today, Ruth will talk to us about shared stories and social media influences on TikTok. Please welcome Ruth Page. We're delighted to have you, Ruth. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Yanis, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate today. I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that, and I will just get my notes available. Perfect. I can't see any of you anymore, so could one of you just unmute and tell me that you can see everything that I'm showing okay?
Everything's fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, I should preface my talk today with saying that this is very much exploratory work. It's work in progress. And so I am going to try my absolute utmost to talk for my allotted time, to allow time for questions and comments, because I would really appreciate your feedback on the ideas that I'm going to share today. Okay, so without any more ado, I'm going to talk to you about the work that I'm doing at the moment, thinking about stories as they're told by influencers, particularly on TikTok. So in this, what I'm doing is building on the framework and the ideas that I set out in my 2018 book, particularly this idea of the shared story. So in my work, I'm taking the ideas from Alexandra Georgopoulou and taking the idea of the shared story and seeing how shared stories actually can become co-constructed and very large, often in social media. So for me, a shared story must include narration that is shared between many tellers. It must be distributed shared across many posts, often between different sites. It must have embeddedness, so it must contain resources which connect texts one to each other, so it's highly intertextual, and they're used to create kind of shared meanings or shared assumptions. So kind of thinking about this in terms of working from Oxencap's dimensions of narrative. So in the book, I explored shared stories in Wikipedia and on Twitter and in YouTube and on Facebook pages. But I've been trying to think, how can we take this further? What other kinds of shared stories emerging might be interesting to explore? And one area that I've been looking at is the work of social media influencers. I became particularly interested in influencers, partly because of the very careful way that they use stories to both develop their identity and to manage their audiences. So this is Crystal Aberdeen's definition of influencers. And as she points out here, that influencers are these everyday, ordinary internet users who accumulate a relatively large following on blogs and social media through the textual and visual narration of their personal lives and lifestyles. And through that, very often what they end up doing is monetizing their following by integrating advertorials into their social media posts. I'm particularly going to talk today about a particular set of influencers or family influencer group on TikTok. I became interested in TikTok because, like an intellectual magpie, I am often attracted by the things that are bright and shiny and new. I hadn't looked at TikTok before. TikTok itself, as you'll know, became really much more visible from the pandemic onwards. And TikTok's really an interesting site in terms of influencers, because the kind of influencers that you see on TikTok really quite contrast with what you might see in Instagram or other kinds of social media platforms. And as Crystal Aberdeen has pointed out in relation to TikTok in particular, the influencers that you see on this site really rely much more on parasociality. So the way that they're managing their audiences based on this idea of relatability, rather than being kind of particular aspirational airbrushed figures, there's a much greater emphasis on what she calls calibrated amateurism, so kind of much closer to the kind of creative vernaculars that we might see on more everyday sites. You see particular kinds of genres emerging on TikTok. So you see particular kinds of pranks and viral posts and audio memes that circulate and really are generated with the view to capitalizing on the kind of viral visibility that spreads very fast through this site. So we might expect there to be a new type of shared story that we see here. And what I want to zone in on is really what these new types of stories are doing. Well, I say new with scare quotes around it because they're not really new, but reworked stories in terms of what they're doing around shared meanings. And the shared meaning that I really want to focus on here is the shared meaning of authenticity and authentication. And you've seen that this is very clearly in the plural on this slide, because they're shared meanings in the plural around authenticity and authentication. So the evolution of authenticity in social media contexts is well documented, and it draws on and retains some of the core meanings of authenticity that have been documented in other kinds of broadcast contexts. So for example, Coupland's work on the ontological meaning of authenticity, where authentic things are assumed to have a, quote, real existence. So in social media context, that develops from being real as opposed to fictional, real as opposed to fake, real as opposed to filtered. It also draws on ideas that Tolson has written about in terms of the kind of spontaneity of reaction rather than staged performances. And these ideas that being authentic means to be ordinary in Sachs's term, often being through granted backstage access to a person's life. So these are kind of discourse analytic approaches to authenticity and processes of authentication that take place through storytelling in particular. In media studies, this kind of is echoed in some of the concepts that we see here. So in media studies, authenticity is seen as a dimension of relatability. It's particularly seen as the counterpart to being aspirational and idealized. It's seen as being unfiltered. It very often will use a candid mode of presentation, often showing the influencer goofing around and performing a very particular kind of humor, which is staged for particular kind of rapport generating effects. It also has a particular kind of commercial meaning where authenticity is assumed to be content which is not being used for monetized content. So if we take these meanings that are in the research literature, we can see that there are these various multifaceted dimensions of authenticity. So it includes evaluation on epistemic and ontological grounds. So is what is being presented real or fake? Or I should say, is it interpreted as real or fake? Is it interpreted as credible or unbelievable? These are based on aesthetic judgments of authenticity. So this relates to both what is told. So is what is told based on everyday experiences or exceptional experiences? Is it based on what is backstage rather than front stage? And how is what is told presented to us? So is this presented to us through the unfiltered amateurism of the camera, or is this filtered and staged in some ways? But it also contains this level of propriety, really judgments of moral behavior. So not just moral behavior, is this true or not true, but why are the stories being told? Are the stories being told because there's no commercial motivation, or are the stories being told in order to gain monetary benefit? And it contains an affective dimension as well. Very often this is to do with the kind of emotions that arise as a result of the humor and the kind of performances of goofing around, but it also has to do with the emotions that are generated in relation to the kind of spontaneous performances of affect that I mentioned as well. So these different aspects of authenticity are in tension with one another, and they have upper and lower limits. So you can see on the one hand how the performance of being ordinary is required in order to be accessible in some ways, but also you have to be engaging, and very often how the influencers are doing that is through the performances of rapport enhancing humor. So being ordinary coupled with being humorous is actually in order to gain an audience. And the more you gain an audience, the more you gain visibility, the more you gain status, and that makes you commercially viable. And then the outcomes of gaining some kind of visibility and commercial outcome from this arise from that. So you can see how these three things get tangled up together in different kinds of ways. That can you be ordinary at the same time as having a commercially viable presence on a social media site? And all of these things, so both the judgments of somebody's outcomes, the judgment of somebody's identity in terms of how they perform being ordinary, the judgment of the humor that is performed, all of this happens against the backdrop about epistemic claims of, is this credible or not? Is this believable or not? Is this true or not? All of these things are in crisis in social media, partly because of the general authenticity crisis, by which I'm referring to the general distrust of information in socially mediated context, things like fake news, and for influencers in particular, how much it is appropriate to disclose about their personal lives or not. That requirement that the influencer be ordinary requires them to disclose things about their personal lives, which there are still limits around, because boring things are not engaging, but also disclosing things about somebody's personal life puts them at risk of visibility in a different kind of way, all of which is brought into close focus by the Smithy family. Now, I may well be talking too fast. Let me try and slow myself down from this point on. Sorry, I get excited and passionate about the subject matter. I'm going to try and slow down. Okay. So I want to show you how the shared stories of the Smithy family play out in TikTok. But let me tell you why I'm interested in the Smithy family. The Smithy family are a UK-based family. They became noteworthy in 2021 because they hit the mainstream news. They hit the mainstream news because they performed being ordinary very well by disclosing their ordinary lives to the point that it was very obvious where they lived. And unfortunately, they were the subject of an arson attack, which you can see on the slide. Here's a picture of their house, which was burnt down. As a result of that, their fans decided to raise money for them with a GoFundMe. So the real life repercussions of being ordinary and visible at the same time led to monetary gain, not just from commercial sponsors, but from their audience, who gave them £50,000, some of which the influencers used for their own outcomes. And they also ended up back in the news precisely because of what they chose to spend some of that money on, which included a jet ski trip, which is what you can see the dad enjoying here. So this is the Smithy family. The dad is Nick, his partner is Jess, his stepson is Jack. These are their daughters, and this is Jack's girlfriend, Amy. And what their stories do is really bring into close focus this question of how the shared stories are used for performing authenticity in TikTok. So the data that I'm looking at today comes from the data set I'm showing you here. So it includes roughly 200 videos, which I gathered during April and October of 2021. I gathered that by using a screencasting technology to record those videos so I could then analyze them. It includes the comments that were in response to those videos, which are, as you can see, here's roughly over 1 million words. I chose that period of time because the arson attack happened in July. And so it gave me 3 months before the arson attack itself, and then 3 months of the aftermath afterwards. And so they're interesting. They're interesting because of the high-level case study where authenticity is brought into focus. They're also really interesting as family influencers, and because they are in some ways also an example of just how really ordinary people during the pandemic created a TikTok account and grew their account to what is now over 3.4 million followers. They're now managed by an agency, and they now generate all of their money through their social media accounts. They have multiple social media accounts, including their Instagram account, and I'm going to draw on that a tiny bit when I talk about the comments later on in this presentation. So what I'm going to do is talk you through how the shared stories, the different qualities of the shared stories, are played out in the Smithy family data, starting with distributed linearity. So thinking about the story structure and whether the story structure, how it's distributed over these multiple posts. So the Smithy family's account exhibits distributed linearity in many ways. The videos of the Smithy family life unfold over time. They post over 20 videos a day on TikTok, and that is used to develop this ongoing bricolage of stories about their daily life, pranks, stunts, and responses to the social media controversy. And all of that is interwoven into a larger story arc of their evolution as influencers and the responses to the arson attack. So in terms of the kinds of stories that get told, these are clearly used to perform being ordinary. These are often repeated daily activities contained in a single video, appealing to shared experiences. This includes things like showing them getting up, going to the cafe for breakfast, taking the children to school, going shopping, collecting the children from school, doing DIY, getting ready for events like the UEFA Euros. I'm going to hopefully, fingers crossed, play you a tiny clip now so you just see and hear an example of one of these.
You all right? How many people in your class now? Everyone?
No. Kizzy's poorly.
Kizzy's poorly. Okay. Is it?
Kizzy's poorly.
Kizzy's poorly. Okay.
Okay. So you can also see and hear from that. This is it's not edited. You get lots of background noise. It's rough camera work. It's if you like, in terms of the calibrated amateurism, this is definitely the kind of aesthetic that you see in these everyday stories. Key to the Smithy family visibility are their pranks and challenges. So pranks and challenges exist within a core aspect of TikTok. From a narrative perspective, one of the things that's really interesting about pranks and challenges is how they drive audience engagement through serial structure to build suspense, so that they show a tiny part of the prank and then they use that to drive audience engagement. So they'll have one part and then a second part and then a third part and then a fourth part of it. So these are structured with a setup and then planning and then action and reaction, which map onto very well-known structures of narrative, which we've seen from the work of Lebov onwards. So orientation, a projected complicating action, the actual action itself, and then the reaction to the prank, which is some kind of evaluation. And then the challenges and pranks are a competitive genre where one person will carry out a prank against somebody else, and then the person who has been pranked will prank somebody else in return. So there's a retribution and a new sequence which carries on and on and on. So this was just one example of many from the data where Nick here is ringing Amy and saying, listen, are you going out for a meal tonight? Yeah. You're going to prank Jack? Yeah. We'll get someone to help you set something up. You make sure you're going to get him good. And she's like, oh, well, what should I do? I don't know. And he's saying, where are you? And then they decide that they're going to spice up Jack's food. And then Nick at the end of that laughs and he says, I can get him anywhere. I don't need to be with you, mate. So Amy then, you're shown Amy in her home getting really spicy sauce out of the cupboard. You see her at the restaurant spicing up his food while he's gone to the restroom. And then you see Jack himself eat the spicy food and be horrified by it. And then the next prank is Jack pranking Amy in return, and so on and so forth. So going alongside being ordinary and pranking, actually what happened for the Smithy family is that you also see landmark events of trouble being documented in their TikTok. So their TikTok is really unlike the Instagram account, where there's very, very little message of the arson attack at all. In the TikTok account, there's much more coverage of the arson attack. Although the attack itself is not actually shown in the TikTok account, you can watch all of it on YouTube from the surveillance that they gathered from people's front door cams. Okay, so here you just can see on this slide here, there are a series of TikToks which were posted on the 15th of July, which was the day after the arson attack. So the first video is simply them showing the aftermath of the fire. There's no voiceover, no sound. And then we see another video where Nick is waking up in his car outside the house in the morning, saying, I got an hour and a half's kip outside the house. And then there is a video where he goes inside the house and gives his emotional reaction to what he can see. And then another clip at the end of the day where he and his partner Jess reflect on the worst 24 hours of their life. So the third one of those is a really good example of the kinds of spontaneity and emotional reaction that's often characterized as being authentic. We've seen there are examples in the literature earlier. Martin Montgomery, for example, has analyzed this in relation to various kinds of news reports. But what you see here is Nick saying he walks into his daughter's bedroom, which is covered in smoke. And he says, I can't, my girls were in this room, but that don't matter to you, does it? So he's clearly addressing the arson attackers here. One of you filmed while the other one done it. I don't think you realize the consequences of what you've done. It's my little girl's room, man. They got it how they want it. I worked so hard all my life to do the right thing. And then the video cuts off there. So even in this emotional reaction, you can see that very clearly the emphasis is on evaluation here. There are still elements of narrative, even in the Lebovian sense. And you can see that this is doing really clear identity work for him as well, in terms of him as a hardworking man who's done the right thing all of his life, being set against the work of the arsonists who have exploited his hard work and destroyed it with the fire. Okay, so distributed linearity allows the influencers to interweave being ordinary, spontaneous reactions and pranking in this kind of ongoing bricolage. But that's by no means the whole story. This is also interwoven with a great deal of intertextuality, which includes the use of music as stance taking. So the music itself is really strongly used within the shared story to exploit in-group shared knowledge. What you see is very often music is used as part of the emotional reactions to the fire in particular, where the influencers, you're using either the title of the song or the lyrics of the song to convey both emotion and evaluation of what has happened to them. So they don't themselves sing. What they do is they lip sync along where the lyrics are animated. You can hear the lyrics. The influencers are lip syncing that. Alongside that kind of musical intertextuality, we also have more conventional forms of intertextuality. For example, hashtags, usernames, and these are used in ad videos. So these are videos where the influencer is promoting sponsored products. Here you can see how there's a story that the influencers are using, showing Nick and Jack actually performing a prank. So they're opening a whole set of toys that they shouldn't have opened already, but that is used to actually promote the toys that they're unwrapping there. And the influencers also use intertextuality to promote their own brand. So they set up their own shop, they have their own website. And here you can see an example of how breaking news, we have a massive sale on our website, is being coupled with the intertextuality of the URL that's there on the video itself. And you can't see it very well in the line drawing that I've created of it, but that is a screenshot of their website where people can go and buy their products. So we have this bricolage of the stories and of the intertextuality, some of which is musical and emotional, some of it which is really commercial, interweaving all these different types of authenticity together. And then we see how all of this is performed by co-tellers. So co-tellership is really strong in TikTok, and it takes many forms where the stories are told by more than one teller. Some of this is within individual videos. So within the individual videos, co-tellership is used to co-construct and perform being a family. This includes many formats such as joint challenges. I'm not going to read it out, but this is Nick and Jess and Jack and Amy going out and seeing who can eat the spiciest chicken Nando. You can also see the way that the genres of TikTok, like stitches. So stitches are where you can take one video and then put another one, stitch it adjacent to it, and have one video and then another that appears after it. In this, we have Jess in the first video saying, I feel like all I do every morning is shout, hurry up, and then they're laughing. And then Nick says, in the next video that's stitched to it, it's funny though when you're shouting at me and Jack, we can't help it, you know what I mean? But we'll stop, we'll try and stop. Sorry, Jess, stop telling us off. So stitches are to perform this co-tellership within the family. But there are also stitches where members of the audience stitch their response to the videos created by the Smithy family. So this is an example where a member of the audience has created a response video that's stitched to part of the footage that I showed you from the day of the fire. So this is part of the audience's response to the fire. So this person is saying they woke up this morning to see the Smithy family's house had been arson attacked. Now I know some people don't like them, but that's fair enough. I'm not too keen on some of the things they've done, but at the end of the day, they're a family with children, including a little baby. I'm flabbergasted that people could go to this length. It's disgraceful. I'm really sorry for you, the Smithy family. I really am. Please let us know about the GoFundMe page, please. I'll be putting in. So stitches also include responses from the audience. Another TikTok genre is a duet. So a duet is where you have the original video and you have the response video, but being shown exactly at the same time. So the two videos play concurrently. So you have the original video and you watch somebody else's response to it. So these can be used to display solidarity where the audience response is displayed visually. You can see it very often by using their facial expression or by using gesture. What they can also do is further annotate that with captions over the top, which is what you can see here. You can also see other forms of co-tellership where the Smithy family take comments and then they recontextualize them onto the videos themselves. This is used to exploit the kind of requests and routines from the video that boost their comments and their audience engagement. And of course, you see co-tellership in the comments themselves. So there are comments that you can comment on a TikTok video. And you can see, if you look at the comments over this 6-month period of time, the wider narrative of the Smithy family's rise as influencers and the more or less shared stance that are taken towards the Smithy family in the kinds of evaluations that are expressed towards them. And this includes the way that authenticity is questioned. So some of the things that you can see in the comments are the ways that the authenticity of the Smithy family is brought into debate. So for example, I'm sorry, but after the jet ski video, the only chance of what you're saying is credible is to show proof of the donations, and then questioning sincerity. So it's on the one hand, show me what you've done, and then the other hand, actually you showing me what you've done brings into question authenticity. We don't judge you as sincere. The judgment that these are people who are making money from half-truths and lies, sorry, it's just hard to believe a word out of your mouth. So one of the things that I did with the comments, I've actually done various things with the comments. I'm only going to tell you about one though, which is to quantify how often the evaluation of inauthenticity in the comments occurred, comparing the comment threads from TikTok with the comment threads to Instagram, and comparing that with the corpus of comments that I had from general lifestyle influencers on Instagram as well. And that's what you see on this slide here. So what you see on this slide here is that the evaluation of inauthenticity occurs most often on the Smithy family's TikTok compared to their Instagram, and that the judgments of inauthenticity are much higher in relation to the Smithy family compared to lifestyle influencers in general. But actually, the evaluation of authenticity, the judgment of them as authentic in some way, still outweighs that of inauthenticity in every case. But in the case of the TikTok accounts, it's pretty close. The judgments of inauthenticity seem to be increasingly close to authenticity. In other words, in TikTok, authenticity comes under closer pressure and is more frequently debated than it is in their Instagram account, and that occurs far more than it does for other kinds of influencers. Okay, people contest the authenticity of the Smithy family, not just in the comments, they also contest it in stitches and duets as well. So I just wanted to show you a few examples of this. So this is one here, a video that is stitched to Smithy family content. It says, I just want to say, I'm not exactly on one side or the other. I believe there are reasons to be wary of the situation. I think them having a fire, not even a year before the recent fire, is something to be suspicious about. This is a duet that comes from another video. I'm going to show you tiny further part of that in a minute. But what you see here is the original video in the background. You see a quote from the original video overlaid on it. So all in all, we have given back out of the 47,000 we have donated the sum of money there. And then the comment that the other person has written on it has said, made 8,900 out of thin air, lol, the lies keep coming. This last example here shows you how people created fake accounts of the Smithy family dilemma. So this was footage, fake footage of the back garden of the what was supposed to claim to be the Smithy family's garden, but wasn't. So the original video says their back garden wasn't affected, and then another person has reposted this saying this account is claiming this is the back garden of the Smithy family, and it's not. It's all fake. So what did the Smithy family do in response to these accusations of inauthenticity? Well, the interesting thing that they do is that actually they don't reply in the comment threads and get into dispute with people in the comment threads. What they do is respond to this in different kinds of videos. And one of the reasons they do that is because of the way that the audience design of TikTok works. If you respond only to something in a comment thread, all you're doing is keeping the visibility of that within that single video artifact. If you respond with another video, what you do is in effect create a kind of reposting, and you are able to repost your response to whatever the claim of inauthenticity is to the whole audience, who might then see that public facing video. So there's a great value in terms of using these videos in terms of capitalizing on the visibility that is possible through the video-based forms of broadcast talk in TikTok. And they do this in a whole range of ways. So in their videos that respond to the claims of inauthenticity, they use techniques such as displaying evidence of what they have done in order to support a claim of veracity in the face of a claim that they have been lying in some ways. So you saw that there were claims that they hadn't used the money from the GoFundMe correctly. And what he does in this video here, so this is the first part of the video where you see Nick sitting and he narrates saying, so guys, I'll get to the point. The GoFundMe money that was raised in our name, not asked for us, but we were very grateful for the people who gathered round and done donating. It was very kind. At the time, we did use it to pay off the finance, and then we put the money back in, and here was the money donated. And what they show you are examples like this, where they show you screenshots from the GoFundMe account where they have then donated the money and specific amounts of money to particular kinds of charities. So this seems to be using the visual effect of the videos to show and tell the truth. However, as I said, there are upper limits of authenticity in all kinds of ways. And the interesting thing is that they don't just claim that what they have done is true. Sometimes what they do is use the reply videos to actually say, no, what we were doing in that prank, you weren't supposed to take that seriously. Here's an example of it. It says, I just thought I'd put it out there. Yesterday's video was a prank. I was pranking Jack. None of those tickets were real. I was pranking him. So they were using this to make ontological claims about the status of particular video content that they have shown. And you can see clearly how this is a reply video. It's got the original comment that they're responding to here overlaid on the top of the video itself. Another way they do this is to use intertextuality. So they use humor as stance taking, recontextualizing the accusations from the comments, which you can see here, and overlaying this onto other intertextual references. This is from the Peacemaker television series, the final scene where the members of the Justice League are displayed at the end of the battle. And in the original television series, the hero says, I'm so fucking sick of that rumor. And in the original, the person replies saying, it's not a rumor. But here, Nick creates a voiceover instead of that original quotation and says, yeah, me too. So he uses humor to mock the claims of inauthenticity and defend his case. But the Smithy family also have to defend themselves against inauthentic representation, again, by narrating and displaying content. But rather than displaying evidence of the truth, what they do here is display evidence and claim it to be fake and show what they were trying to do to block it. And so use the visual evidence here to try and warn their fans. What happened in this case was that the Smithy family were themselves subject of having false accounts made that claimed that one of the family had died. And they wanted to come back on and to say that actually what they were doing, so I'll just read it to you. It says, well, this is not the sort of video I wanted to be doing today. We have to address a few things that are going on. Jack isn't dead. Amy's not pregnant. We're finding it extremely hard to delete and block everyone. And then they just show how they're trying to block the accounts, but are failing to do so. Okay, so in summary, I hope I've shown you, oh, I'm so sorry, that should say stories, not stories. I knew there was going to be a typo in here somewhere. I'm living with imperfection at the moment. This is one of them. So the shared stories in TikTok are characterized by distributed linearity that are used by these influencers to perform authenticity by showing us behind the scenes, personal scenes from their life, by showing us humorous goofing around in pranks, by showing us everyday events and their emotional reactions, all of which promote their identity. This goes interwoven with the intertextuality of TikTok, where they promote shared in-group knowledge, especially through the use of music, and that is interwoven with advertising and commercial ends. All of this is integrated with co-tellership, which are used by the family themselves to display relational connections and to present themselves as a shared family identity that is used to display audience engagement, particularly taking into account the support of their audience and to respond to accusations from their audience, and in doing so to display more or less shared stances amongst the audience themselves, the supporters and the critics of the Smithy family. And in this, the supporters and the critics of the Smithy family and the Smithy family themselves help us see how these different dimensions of authenticity and authentication get entangled with each other in the shared stories. So ontology is entangled with suspicion of the Smithy family, primarily based on commercial manipulation, so that they have manipulated the fire themselves for commercial gains. So it is an attack on their propriety. Some of this draws on the more affective dimensions of authenticity and authentication, particularly maneuvering between the ability or inability to interpret the Smithy family pranks as serious or non-serious, drawing on very, very familiar strategies of saying, you as an in-group get the joke, you as an out-group do not. And all of this is used all the time to have to navigate the status of interactions as real or fake, navigating the meaning of inauthenticity around the parameter of veracity. All of this then is used, I think, to perform a kind of identity and interactional work, which is used to navigate between the in-groups and the out-groups, the supporters and the critics of the Smithy family. So those who make claim of the Smithy family's inauthenticity, who claim this is all a conspiracy that the Smithy family have pulled off in order to make money. Those who got the joke and who don't get the joke of the Smithy family's pranks, and those who wish themselves to use inauthenticity to attack the Smithy family and actually piggyback on the back of their visibility. So in conclusion, shared stories continue to be important, and they are reshaped by the affordances of TikTok, especially the intertextuality and music and the strict stitches and the duets that are used on this site. The Smithy family's stories demonstrate how the dimensions of authenticity are contested and entangled actually in quite familiar ways, but are also continually reshaped by the socioeconomic and mediated dynamics of this as a particular form of social media. I'm really aware that there is so much more work I want to do on this, particularly looking at other family influences. One family that's really intriguing at the moment is the Ciccone family, particularly the father figure in that, Jolie Ciccone, and comparing the work across platforms. And there's lots of work too to analyze further the reception of the stories and the impact of inauthenticity within the wider influencer landscape. Okay, I am done. I'm really sorry. I know I talked too fast, but hopefully you were able to follow along at least some of it from the slides. I'm really happy to take questions and comments in the remaining 17 minutes we have left.
Thank you so much for this, Ruth. We have time for questions. Heike, will you do the moderation or shall I?
I suggest that I will have a look at the chat and you will.
Okay, I'll do the hands and you'll do the chat. And please either raise your yellow hand or put a question in the chat. And I see Susan Herring with a question. Please go first.
Ruth, I'm so interested to hear your talk because I've started analyzing duets on TikTok myself recently. But I'm also doing a study of video filters, not specifically on TikTok. We've been interviewing people and we've asked them, among other things, what percentage of people they believe are using filters to enhance their appearance in some way on different social media platforms. And interestingly, some people will say that 100% of people on TikTok are using filters. And that's obviously, I mean, I don't think that's true at all based on the data that I've been collecting from the duets. But it's interesting, the perception that TikTok is more, less authentic in this regard compared to Instagram and Snapchat, which are the other two big platforms where they use filters. So I just wanted to share that's sort of supporting what you found there, which I found was so interesting in terms of the perceptions of inauthenticity being so much greater than on Instagram. But I have a question for you, which has to do with why you chose to screencast the videos rather than simply downloading them and saving them to your computer, and also why you chose to represent the stills as sort of this black and white line drawing cartoonish representation, which in a way renders them less authentic. So could you maybe speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I chose to screencast them because it was really easy for me to do, and I could just actually capture the sequence in which they appeared, and so what it was actually like from the end user's experience of watching them. So it was partly ease and partly to try and capture the user experience rather than downloading them. So pragmatic more than anything else on that end. And why I chose to represent them as line drawings, it's because of the ethical conundrums of this kind of data, that even when it is really publicly available and clearly designed to be seen by thousands and thousands of people, this was ethically more appropriate than actually using the original screenshots themselves. And in the case of the Smithy family, I left their faces unmodified, but in the case of people who do not have that, like millions of followers, the Smithy family are public figures, that they present themselves as public figures. Other people who do not present themselves as public figures, in the interest of ethics, I also added further anonymization to those pictures, just purely on an ethical basis, more out of caution than anything else, but also knowing that this presentation was going to be recorded and made available. And so just out of all of those reasons was why I made the line drawings and used those in the presentation.
Yeah, I thought that might have something to do with it, but they don't anonymize them, right? So it doesn't really disclose their identity.
But legally, it means that those images belong to me and I can do what I want with them.
Right.
So in terms of the law, it means that I can I can take those images and I can give Yanis permission to re-show them. Whereas if they're screenshots, they're not mine.
Okay, so thanks, Ruth, for thinking about that. We didn't think of that in the first place.
Yeah, that's what being editor of discourse, context and media did for me, Yanis.
Absolutely, thank you. I'll pass on the word to Edith Budovnik for another question.
Oh, hi, I'm actually sitting here in Austria, and I've recently read your book on the stories, which I found absolutely fascinating. And what I'm interested in is how did you get the comments down? I'm interested in which computer solution you took, because I'm sort of an IT newbie and I'm just trying to do that. And the second question is, what are you going to do with the comments which you collected?
Okay, so I am not technologically accomplished in any way, shape or form. Everything I do has to be minimally technically complex. And so I used a tool called Export Comments. You can pay a small fee and then download comments from particular sites, including TikTok, and you can choose to do so in a way that anonymizes them completely, so is compliant with GDPR regulations in the EU and the UK. So that's how I did that and why I did that. And what I'm doing with the comments is twofold. So partly what I did with the original data. So I did a project looking at lifestyle influencers on Instagram, and that is a paper that is under review for, and I think it's an edited collection about influencers. And in that, I was really exploring the dimensions of relatability. So I was really interested in relatability as this non-linguistic concept and how we could map it out linguistically speaking. And so I worked with Sketch Engine, measuring out those different dimensions of relatability. And what I actually did, what I originally was doing with these comments, was to see the extent to which relatability was played out in TikTok, because I was just interested in a cross-platform comparison across those two different sites. Yeah. So, oh no, it's been, thank you so much for being here, Susan. It's been really lovely to see you.
It's a lot of fun watching and doing that sort of stuff. Any chance, I mean, I'm asking in my sort of own thing, because I'm doing the whole thing in a cat-related sense. I'm looking at how people use cat-inspired language online.
I saw your cat.
Platforms.
Your cat and his
you did.
the tail came across.
Yes, I'm going. His name is Wicht. He's famous. He's all my students want to see him in the online lectures. He wants to be online.
I have the same thing with my dog. No. There are poor potential of pets.
Good. Yeah, but what I wanted to say is that the shared stories and the small stories, they really offer a very good way of categorizing the online communities that you have. I mean, I find that with my cats, and because you've got the influencers, you've got the other ones who want to raise awareness for that kind of stuff. So I really thought that's a very, very good approach, which I find very useful. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, pets are a very good strategy that are used often by influencers. So what I saw in my lifestyle influencers was, if you wanted to display being nurturing and you didn't have a baby, the next best thing you could do was get a puppy and display being nurturing through having a puppy.
That's true. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I've raised I don't think we have any comments in the chat. Heike?
There's one comment that related to the question of using filters on TikTok, and Simon Meyer-Vieracker wrote that filters are default on TikTok and it's not obvious how to deactivate them.
Simon, would you like to follow up on that, since you've raised your hand as well?
I don't want to comment on this, but I would have another question, if I may.
Yes, go on.
So thank you, Ruth, for this really fantastic talk. It's very fascinating to see this analysis of this account-based approach that you showed us. So you followed one special account, but there are other approaches to TikTok. One would be the For You page-based approach. So just use the app as everyone of the users does it. And still another approach would be the sound-based approach. So to follow how special sounds are reused again and again and again, which creates another type of intertextuality. So you were talking about intertextuality, but still from this account-based approach. So and I wonder if we can also expand the notion of shared stories by this sharing of sounds. And if we then still can talk of narration, because all those videos that we find that reuse all these audio memes that you were talking about, and I don't know if they are really narration. It's more some kind of performance, and it's more drama than epos, to speak in literal theoretical notions.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I should perhaps say that I started off with the Smithy family purely really out of curiosity more than anything else, and because they were a counterpoint to the other kinds of influences that I was interested in, and because they happened to be in the mainstream news in the UK at that particular time. So that was kind of why I ended up doing a particular focus on them. But yeah, there are all kinds of ways that you can think about data collection. There's a real issue, I think, with the For You page because of the way that the algorithms in TikTok work, and you get it very driven by things that you've looked at before. So you need to think really carefully around, okay, what I'm seeing here is not neutral, it's being driven by my previous searches within TikTok. So how you counterbalance that, I'm not really sure, other than maybe have a pool of people looking for certain kinds of things. I'm doing some exploratory work for a grant application, which is around mental health influences and the stories around mental health in TikTok, which are a whole other really different kind of aspect of what the app is being used for. And the kind of sampling procedures that we're looking at there are kind of to cut across both account-based sampling on principles according to the influences that we're interested in, different types of influences, also using hashtags around particular kinds of events, so particularly kind of mental health days and particular kinds of campaigns, and cutting that in a third way across the kind of algorithmic For You pages. So we're trying to take a three-way approach to the sampling from the TikTok content there in order to try and get a user, creator, and technologically principled way of thinking about the data collection on that. But this sound thing is really interesting. It's the end of term for us. I've just been teaching a module called Narratives Across Media. A whole ton of my students, or it feels like a ton, many of my students have written their projects about the difference between mainstream news and TikTok news, and the way that stories have migrated through TikTok, and actually exactly what you're talking about, and sound as a sampling or an intertextual reference there. And I think it works as not so much as a story, but as I was saying in the slides about narrative stance taking. But I think there is some interesting work that's been done there to be done there, and it makes me think a great deal of both the work around musicology and narratology, and also it makes me think about the work that's been done in stylistics, analyzing music lyrics. And so I haven't done it, but I'm absolutely sure there's a really interesting piece of work to be done looking at that.
One small follow-up question, if I may. Are the sounds of the Smithy family are reused by others, so that the sounds of the Smithy family become memes by themselves?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to look at. I'd be very happy to have a conversation outside the call and talk through how that might be analysed. Thank you, though. That's a great thought. I feel like I need another lifetime.
No, it's about promoting dialogue, as we said. Heike?
There's a very short question in the chat. Xuan Gao asks whether the family is affiliated to a multi-channel network, MCN.
I'm not sure. What is a multi-channel network? I've looked up there. They have a particular named agent. So I'm really sorry. I don't know what a multi-channel network is.
Are you still in the room?
Maybe hi, Ruth. Yeah. Sorry, I used the abbreviation there. So it's usually a company, social media company that can help social media creators to produce their content, manage their fan base, giving their advice about how to run their channel, etc.
Oh, yes.
Whether you know that's the case with the family you are looking at.
Yes, they are now. Yes.
So I might follow up with a question I had, maybe the last one, maybe we would have time for another one. Let's see. I'd like to follow up on what Edith, you said, Ruth, in your response to Edith about how to figure out the purchase of some of these media studies notions for linguistic analysis. And the one that drew my attention in your talk is the calibrated amateurism that you showed us very well with the Smithy family. That also connects, of course, to the issue of authenticity. And I was trying to think this a bit through in terms of social linguistic authenticities and the discussion in social linguistics. And I was wondering how the authenticity as displayed and performed on TikTok, how it ties in with indexical orders. So with the basic idea that social meaning in language emerges at different levels and from different perspectives. Now, the Smithy family, I mean, they obviously speak some variety of colloquial English, and I guess that's the observer dialectologist would be able to figure out regional variables in their speech, but do they themselves use linguistic variation strategically? So do they perform code switching or style shifting? And do they draw on language in order to authenticate themselves? Do they draw on language in order to perform being a native or being a local or something like that?
They don't code switch at all. I can feel myself lapsing. So I was born in Southeast London, and they are based not very far from where I was born and grew up. So I can feel myself turning into Smithy family speak, which may yet happen. So they don't code switch at all. They retain their presentation absolutely categorically. I've never seen anything other than exactly the syntactic and phonological style. that they display is consistent, absolutely consistent.
So would you
All-
say that consistency is for them a feature of or a resource for authenticity? Then?
Well, the one aspect of their identity that is never questioned is where they're from, and their working class background. That is not in question.
Yeah, and yes, and they don't have to give proof of that any other than just normal speaking.
Yeah, but also because of where they constantly display themselves. So that, okay, this is their local shop, these are the local streets. That's how they ended up with their house being burnt down, because they consistently did that.
Yeah. Okay. So, but I think that that's a question that sort of shifts the interest in that research also towards social linguistics a little bit. What is the value and the relevance of speech and speech style in these constructions of authenticity? Yeah.
Isabel O just asked in the chat whether could this reflect on their perception of their in-group audience.
It could do. I think it's a more general thing, actually, that it seems to me very much in line with the observation that other scholars have made about the rise of TikTok, that unlike Instagram, and actually if you compare with their Instagram account, so their Instagram account is very much more airbrushed than the TikToks. And even in the account of the fire, there's only one single post, and the caption just reads like something like, oh, the only way is up from here. There's no negativity in it. It's mostly visual, so you don't hear them in that Instagram account. So I think it's more something to do with TikTok rather than their particular audience. And I think it's the I think their sense, from what I've seen in the comment, their sense of the in-group audience is less about a particular demographic and more towards supporters or not supporters. And the out-group are the trolls, and the in-group are everybody else. And it's less to do with we are particularly appealing to a particular set of people here, and more to do with the only people who are against us are the trolls. So I don't think it's so much about an in-group positioning. I think it's more typical of what happened in the pandemic is that ordinary people took to TikTok in the way that in Instagram, the influencer culture collapsed somewhat at that point, because the influencers couldn't go on their beautiful trips and they couldn't go outside. And when they did go outside, that caused them lots of problems because they shouldn't have been breaking social distancing, blah, 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 and all the rest of it. So there was a kind of implosion of the influencer industry in Instagram at that point. And at the same time, this rise of the kind of grassroots, return to the vernacular, return to the ordinary people, return to actual, genuine influencer, everyday, ordinary people, rather than celebrities who are co-opting social media to continue already enhance their extremely large fan bases. So that is how I would see it, rather than we're appealing to a certain kind of demographic, regional appeal. I don't know how far their appeal would stretch outside the UK. I think there's a particular kind of Britishness about their identity. The closest thing I could compare them to are the comedy series, The Royals, which you may have seen outside. That may be familiar to those of you outside the UK, but that is that kind of family identity that they have worked on in their brand. And I don't know how far that really transfers as amusing or appealing outside the UK.
Great, and thank you for this explanation about the relation between Instagram and TikTok. I just found that very illuminating, Ruth. Okay, so we should bring this now to a close. I think we're a bit past time. Thanks to our speaker for today, once again, for your great lecture, and thanks to the audience for participating in discussion as well.